Alright, so it's been a while, and it's been so long that I'm actually traveling to a location undisclosed. And bonus points if you know where I am just by, like, you know, that lamp. But wanted to go over some hands from this $350 Maryland Live one-day event that I played. Let's just get into the hands. Alright, so blinds at 300, 500 with a 500 big blind ante. I actually think almost all the events at Maryland Live are now big blind ante events. Awesome. I have about 24K in my stack, and early position bumps it up to 1100. He only has about 7K in his stack to start the hand. Cutoff calls, I call, and big blind calls. Oh yeah, and I have king 10 of hearts. The flop comes 10, 9, 8 with one heart and checks to EP, the original raiser. He jams and folds around to me. I just make the call. I don't think there's kind of much decision to be had here. We're definitely going to be beat here sometimes, but he could probably have ace jack. He can have some other stuff, so I just stick it in there. We end up having the same hand when he has king 10 of clubs, although I do have a backdoor, and the turn gives us a sweat. Turn gives us a bit of a sweat with the 8 of hearts. And the river is the 7 of hearts. So, pretty nasty one there for him. We get super lucky and just pick up a pretty big amount of chips compared to our stack there. In this next hand, we are at the 1K, 1.5K level with a 1.5K big blind ante. You notice in these big blind ante structures, a lot of times they kind of smooth out some of the transitions and they get rid of some of the smaller denomination chips earlier. So you end up with some of these like 1K, 1.5K levels, like 2K, 3K levels, things like that. It's a little bit weird, but you kind of get used to it, and at least from my perspective, it's definitely worth it. So anyway, the big blind's 1.5K. We have 45K in our stack. Ace 10 of clubs in EP, and I bump it up to 4K. A little bit big, but not insane, I think, in this field, and I tend to go a little bit bigger than most people anyway. The button in the small blind call, so we go 3 ways to a flop, which is ace high. Ace 6-2 with 2 diamonds and a heart. I'm gonna go ahead and c-bet here. It's a pretty wet board, and I definitely want to get value. We can get called by worse ace X a lot. So I bet 5.5K and only the button calls, so we're going heads up to a turn. The turn's the 8 of diamonds, which I mean, even if it wasn't a diamond, is not the best card because I kind of prefer an overcard. The 8 improves ace 8 to a better hand than us now. And obviously the 3rd diamond on board is pretty not ideal. So with this kind of unfortunate turn card, I just decided to check, and fortunately the button checks behind, which obviously pretty happy about. The river ends up pretty much bricking out. It's a 5 of spades, so doesn't bring a 4th diamond, which is good. And the only really things that came in are really weird backdoor stuff. So I feel like my hand is gonna be good here almost all the time at this point. So I just decided that I could go for value and try to get called off by a worse ace. Might be a little bit thin because so many weaker ace X have now become 2 pair. But I decided to bet 6.5K, pretty small, just trying to get called. And the button raises to 15K. So at this point, it seems really likely that he just has something like king jack of diamonds, king queen of diamonds, something where he had a flush draw on the flop, made the nut flush on the turn specifically, and wanted to trap and get me to basically do exactly what I did. So it's hard to really give him bluffs. It's hard to really see him raising anything worse for value as well. So I just let it go. He doesn't show, but I feel pretty good about that one, despite being a little sad about how much I had to lose. So despite losing a decent chunk in that last hand, I've chipped up a little bit back up to 45K, but the blinds are now 1K, 2K with a 2K big blind ante, so really getting short in here. There's 4 limps, and I'm in the small blind with ace deuce offsuit. I don't really love this hand, but I think folding is kind of out of the question with the price we're getting. If we flop an ace, it's sometimes going to be good, and we can flop some 2 pairs, we can flop some straights occasionally, not very often. But I decided to call, and the big blind checks. The flop comes ace king 6, and it checks to EP, who bets 4K. I don't really like leading out here with the weakest ace I can have, so I'm usually just checking to call. There are 2 calls in front of me, and even though I was checking to call, I think when there are 2 calls, in particular a bet and 2 calls, not like a bet and a call or just a bet, I think it really warps pretty far toward a fold, because if there's just a bet and a call, it's pretty possible that like the better has a flush draw and the caller has a king, or vice versa sometimes. And if there's just a bet, then you know he can have draws. When there's a bet and 2 calls, we're kind of like hoping for the perfect storm, where like the better has a flush draw and the first caller has just a king, and the overcaller has like a gutter where he just thinks he's getting a good price. So we're kind of, again, hoping for that perfect storm, hoping for things to go like really perfectly for our hand to be any good. And then we have to dodge like probably close to half the deck. Maybe not half the deck, that might be an exaggeration, but like a third of the deck or so on the turn and the river. And it's going to be hard to call future bets. And we're going to be behind a better ace-x a very non-zero amount of time. So I just fold, and it does end up being a good fold because I was behind to a better ace from the original better. And I don't remember what ace he had, but it was one that was going to play pretty often with the board run out. And then someone actually had a flush draw and got there with the flush draw. So it's sort of an inconsequential hand, but I think those spots are sort of important to talk about, because there's spots where it's really easy to just sort of, you know, close your eyes and click the call button, so to speak. And it feels like, oh, I'm just kind of unlucky because I flopped top pair and someone had better, right? But I think finding spots like this to just get away really add up, especially in tournaments where, I mean, this would have potentially been, you know, a pretty defining hand if I'd put in a couple of bets. So blinds are still at the 1K, 2K big blind ante level, and we're actually chipped up to 60K, but I don't think I really had any big hands go down at this time, just kind of picking up the blinds, maybe getting some 3 bets through, things like that. So here we are, about 65K in our stack. I opened ace-9 offsuit in the hijack to 4.5K, which is kind of the standard at this point in the tournament. The button and the small blind both call, so we're going freeways to a flop, which is 9-8-6 with 2 clubs. I c-bet 7,500 with top pair and just the button who calls. Now the button is someone who I know is basically a regular. I'm not sure if he's a pro or not. I think he probably is like a semi-pro or a pro. I don't play enough hours to really always know who's a pro and who's not a pro, but whatever, there you go. He calls and the small blind folds. The turn's a deuce of hearts, and we now kind of have a little bit of an awkward situation stack size wise, except that I was sort of planning for this. If we got 1 caller, depending on who it was, if it was the button, I was planning to just jam, and if I got 2 callers, I was planning to also jam. If it was just a small blind, I might have gone for some smaller sizes, but I just felt like he was gonna not believe me at this sizing a lot of times and kind of think I was on a lot of draws. So even though I have, you know, like 53, 54K or something in my stack, I just shove it in. And the button goes into the tank, which is definitely good. When you do a play like this, because the sizing's so large, you're pretty much praying for a tank. If I get snapped here, I'm almost never good. So once he doesn't snap call, I feel pretty good about my hand. He's in the tank for probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 minutes, and he ends up calling. I turn it over, and he turns over Jack 10. And I was sort of surprised, and I didn't have a lot of time to be surprised because the river was the 10 of spades. And his pair of 10s is gonna win and bust me out of the tournament. Now, the reason why this hand is so tricky is because when I size this way, yes, I'm gonna have some draws, but I think they're gonna be the combo draws a lot of the time. And a lot of times my combo draws are gonna be things where maybe one of his cards to pair is good, but probably just one. And like sometimes he's gonna hit a pair and it's gonna give me a flush or a straight. So I just didn't feel like he had that many outs, like as many outs as he would think. He would have to put me pretty much exactly on the hand that I have. And then I still don't think he's getting the right price. I haven't actually done the math, but I bet over the size of the pot by a pretty reasonable amount. He just has to have so much equity, and I don't think he really has it here. So I was definitely surprised by that because, you know, I had a lot of respect for this player. And looking back, it's sort of like, in the moment, you're sort of like, wow, that wasn't what I expected you to do. And it's a little bit, I don't know, I guess judgmental. And I guess I want to talk about that for a second because when it comes to poker and it comes to like your opponents, being non-judgmental is really powerful. And being judgmental, on the other hand, is sort of a crutch, I think. We end up judging other players so that we can get away from thinking about our own play, and maybe judging isn't the right word, but sort of judging our own play instead, and judging what we could do better. And on top of that, you know, we're all human beings. Like, this guy might not make the same call the next day or the next week or the next month or whatever. Maybe he just wasn't really having that great of a day, that great of a session, that great of a tournament. I wasn't playing with him all day. You know, I'd been at the table with him for, you know, only some amount of time that was not the entire tournament. So I think approaching every opponent, and particularly opponents that you've played with before, but in each new session, approaching them in a non-judgmental and sort of like a curious way. So being like curious about, okay, well, why did he call there? And was there something that I could have done to play the hand better or control what happened better? Now, at the end of the day, him calling is kind of a good thing for me, right? If I think it's a bad call, then it's good for me because I'm gonna pick up more chips on average. That being said, in the moment I preferred the fold because I just wanted to take down the pot and not really, I mean, it's not flipping, but not really take like sort of a thin situation. But that's just sort of what's been on my mind. Non-judgment, it's tricky. I mean, I definitely come from a place of like evaluation when it comes to poker, and I'm definitely trying to think about what is the right play, and I'm sometimes critical of myself, and I think that I'm definitely most critical of myself, but I think that can bleed into being critical of other players in a way that's not really beneficial, because there's evaluating, but then there's judging. So that's gonna be it. Remember, if you like my videos, hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. There's a button somewhere, I think it's down here. Left and right is really tricky. Leave me a comment letting me know what you thought. Let me know if you know where I am based on the lamp. Let me know what you think about like judging players versus evaluating opponents. Share this video with your friends, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.